What is up, everybody? This is your boy Claydo, aka Clay Cali, aka Clayton, California. Hit that IG, dog. I'm be posting over there and stuff. So follow me, please. I post all kinds of music stuff, and I like cars and alcohol. So anyway, this is another first week sales weekly update. Today is March 20th, which means we are talking about albums that came out on Friday, March the 8th. The first week sales tallies are up for that week, and I'm on metalinsider.net. I'm gonna run through these real fast because I'm on break at work. Turn the car off because it's a little loud. So, first album we have for the week of March 8th is Tesla's Shock. Debuted at number 3. This is just the traditional album sales chart, not the sales plus streaming. So they debuted at number 3 with 21,750. Tesla, it's their 9th studio album. It did better than their 2014 release. I always pictured Tesla as like the hair metal band that like nobody ever really cared about. And for whatever reason, they're always opening every single like classic rock tour. Like you see these guys on tour with everybody, every amphitheater classic rock show you go to, Tesla's there. Like they just always are. And I always thought that nobody cared about them. I always thought they were like that. Like, you know, it's like how Cheap Trick is always direct support on those classic rock tours. Tesla's always opening those classic rock tours. So I always thought nobody really cared. They just had some decent songs that people kind of knew, and they were friends with everybody from that scene, so they always got on these tours. I thought that was kind of their place. But I guess they have some actual fans because their last record, which was their first since 2008, came out in 2014. Their last record, 2014, only sold 13,575 copies. And now they're at, in just traditional sales, 21,750. Now, I'm not entirely sure if they're on tour right now at the moment. They might be. Maybe that significantly helped them. Either way, that is a pretty huge increase. That's almost 100% increase. That's nuts, especially for a band like Tesla, who they never really had great sales. And again, I never thought they were really that popular. So for them to have an almost 100% increase, and they haven't put out an album in 5 years, that's pretty nuts. So good for you, Tesla. Still not a fan. Next, we have Children of Bodom, Hexed. Debuted at number 34 with 3,350 copies. Now, let me tell you, man, Children of Bodom, I don't know what it is about them. Maybe they're just starting to get to that point where everybody is just kind of tired of their sound, because they haven't really compromised their sound at all. They haven't really sold out or done anything drastically different than they ever have. I think people are genuinely just getting more bored with them, really. And I can imagine from the band standpoint, or from Alexi Laiho's standpoint, it's probably hard to keep writing the same songs over and over and over again when you already did it so well 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So their last few records have been dropping fairly significantly in sales. Their last record was I Worship Chaos, and it sold 5,725 copies. I Worship Chaos was their 5th number 1 in Finland, which doesn't take a whole lot of sales to get to number 1, but that's where they're from, obviously. They got a big following there. So yeah, went from 5,725 copies, and now they're at 3,350 copies. Not great. Children of Bodom have always been one of like the biggest Melodeath bands in the world, really. Obviously, their involvement in like Viva La Bam, or how their music was in the soundtrack for those shows, definitely helped them, and it helped their profile in the United States. And I want to say their peak was around like Blood Drunk or something like that as far as sales go, and they've gradually just been on a decline since then. It's really unfortunate. I think they're a great band, but if I want to listen to Children of Bodom, I'm gonna go listen to like Hatebreeder or Follow the Reaper. I'm not, I don't necessarily need a new album of theirs. And I know like Relentless Reckless Forever was all right, but that was kind of the last album that I really followed. So next we have Our Last Night, which is like that YouTube cover band that always like does punk and like genty radio rock covers of pop songs. Their new album is Let Light Overcome. Debuted at number 39 with 3,000 copies sold. I actually do like some of those covers that these guys do. They're super talented guys. They do a really good job at what they do, and it's super impressive. The thing that confuses me about them is that they tour a lot, and they headline their own tours. I think I don't think I've ever seen them on a support slot for a tour, but their most popular songs by far are their covers. Like they're a cover band, I mean, they cover like every popular modern pop song, and they upload it to YouTube, and it gets like 1 million views in the span of 3, 4, 8 weeks, whatever. So that's kind of their market. That's kind of their niche. They do these cover songs, and then they also release original material. So I'm honestly kind of shocked to see 3,000 copies self-released. That's pretty good. I mean, I know their YouTube platform is gigantic, and they have a pretty large presence on Facebook and probably Instagram as well. So 3,000 copies is pretty good for a self-released band who isn't necessarily known for their original material. Good for you guys. That's cool. Next we have Buckcherry, debuted at number 47 with 2,525 copies sold. Buckcherry's still around, man. They had a couple songs, Crazy Bitch, Cocaine, whatever. But does anybody really care about Buckcherry anymore? I don't think so, and I think this is a pretty good indication of that. Their last record sold 6,225 copies, and it didn't manage to outdo the previous record in 2013, and then this record sold even less. Obviously, Buckcherry is continuing their downswing. Obviously, the entire industry at large is continuing its downswing. So, I don't know. I can't necessarily speak to the fact that they have less fans than they did when they put out their last record. Maybe they do. I would assume they do, because genuinely, who cares about Buckcherry, man? And I'm sorry to say that. I don't know how they're still even going, to be honest. Next we have Tyr, which is like that, where are they from? Like Iceland or something? Or Finland? Or Tyr is from like a really weird European place. Faroe Islands, I think. Their new album, Hel, or H-E-L, Hell, whatever it is, debuted at number 88, 1,550 copies sold on Metal Blade Records. 1,500 copies, pretty good for a band that doesn't necessarily have a huge presence. I know they're big in like the folky, melodic, death metal world, folk metal, Viking metal, that sort of thing. 1,500 copies is good for anybody in that scene. And it says they outdid their last record, and their last record sold 1,450 copies, so they're maintaining consistency. Next we have Misery Index, 1,425 copies to debut at number 94 on Season of Mist Records. It managed to outdo its 2014 predecessor. Misery Index is one of those bands that they're almost like Tesla in a way, you know? Like, they're that metal band that's been around for a long time. Their records never sell that well. They never necessarily do their own headlining tours, but they're a good support band. They put on a great show, and they keep going out on tour. I mean, I'm sure they've made a boatload of friends, and yeah, they tour a shitload. They're always support, though. They're never a headliner. Okay, so next we have Seeyouspacecowboy, which is like that throwback metalcore band. Like, I think they play like early, mid-aughts metalcore before it went super radio and super poppy. They play like OG metalcore, like late 90s, early 2000s, that kind of stuff. They sold 810 copies to debut at number 150, and they're on Pure Noise Records, and it's their debut album. So to sell 800 plus copies of your debut record as a metal or hardcore band, it's great. Good for them. Seeyouspacecowboy is like a newer hype band, so 800 copies is pretty good. I'm interested to see how this sells moving forward. We'll see how they go. We'll see how they do. Seeyouspacecowboy, I'm interested. Next we have The Raven Age. Conspiracy is their album, sold 420 copies. The Raven Age is that band with, I believe, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. It's his son. Steve Harris' son, The Raven Age. They're the band that always gets to tour with Iron Maiden. I wonder why. Anyway, their album sold only 420 copies. 420 copies, I think, is a really good example of that they're either not a good band or people just aren't interested in them. People just don't like them. Being Steve Harris' son can't make you fans, okay? Opening for Iron Maiden can't necessarily give you fans. If Iron Maiden's fans aren't into you, so to me, bands like that should work harder. They shouldn't tour with Iron Maiden out the gate, you know what I mean? They should do their own tours, they should try to get support slots, and then they should build their brand, and then they should get the Iron Maiden tour. They shouldn't just jump onto an Iron Maiden tour. That just makes everybody look at you funny. And then finally, for the debuts of this week, we have a band called Holding Absence. Never heard of them. They sold 200 copies on Sharptone Records. It's their debut album. Not great. 200 copies, it's whatever. And now we're at the notable sales section, so this is just other hard rock and metal albums that are on the charts this week that were released prior to this week. Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, yet again, is at number 6 with 12,375 copies sold, 25% drop. Greta Van Fleet, Anthem of the Peaceful Army, is at 3,925 copies sold. It had an 18% boost. See, again, in an age of declining record sales, Greta Van Fleet isn't selling a record, having it stay high, and then continually dropping. They're like selling a record, having it stay high, dropping a little bit, dropping a little bit, dropping a little bit, and then they're consistently staying on the charts. They're doing one of these little numbers. How are they gaining 4,000 new fans a week? Like, what is going on? Is it all streams? Is it all, I don't know, I don't get it. I mean, well, no, because these are all traditional album sales on this chart, so that's 4,000 traditional albums that they sold. Who is buying this? Either way, good for you, Greta Van Fleet. I don't want to be a hater. Next, we have Dream Theater, Distance Over Time, at number 36. It's their third week on the charts, 3,050 copies, 43% drop. Not bad. Again, for Dream Theater, I would have expected a little bit better, but for week number 3, they're selling 3,000 copies. Could be better, but not bad. Next, we have Queensryche, who had a pretty strong debut last week, I believe 8,100 copies. This is week 2. They sold 2,600 copies. 68% drop in week 2, and they're at number 44. That's not bad. 68% drop. Hard rock and metal sales in the second week usually drop pretty hard. It's usually between like 75 and 90%. So for Queensryche to only drop 68%, good for you guys. Obviously, their fan base is a little bit older, and they're not as focused on getting the music right when it comes out, I guess. Disturbed, 2,400 copies this week, and their album came out in, I believe, late October, early November. Disturbed and Greta Van Fleet seem to always be like kind of right next to each other in the sales, because both their albums came out the same week. But Greta Van Fleet keeps selling this much more than Disturbed. Next, I just wanted to bring this one up real fast. Behemoth's I Loved You at Your Darkest is a re-entry. It sold 1,850 copies this week to debut, or to come back at number 69. So from being completely off the charts, which is like less than 500 copies. Wow, yeah. So the album dropped off in November, and then, what, 6 months later almost, it goes from less than 500 copies to 1,800 copies. I don't know what Behemoth was doing this last week or the last few weeks, but hell, that's great, man. 1,800 copies to shoot back up like that. I don't think they're on tour right now. Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? I don't think they were necessarily a whole lot in the press, any more than usual anyway, so weird. So next we're going to talk about In Flames. I The Mask debuted last week. 74% drop. 1,675 copies sold. Not great, In Flames. Not great. Demon Hunter. They had the top debut last week. They sold, between both their albums that they released last week, they sold 23,000 copies. Basically 12,000 of each. And now they dropped from number 7 and 8 to number 128 and 129. War sold 900 copies, 990, so almost 1,000, and Peace sold 890 copies. So that's a 92% drop. Obviously their fan base was super stoked and they were waiting for it to come out, and then it finally did. This is like the other end of the spectrum, whereas like Queensryche didn't drop quite as much as the average of hard rock and metal bands drop in week 2, and then Demon Hunter is like the other extreme. Like, they dropped hard. 92% is insane. Going from 12,000 to 800. Man, your fan, I mean, maybe they had a lot of pre-orders or something, but that's not good. Mark Morton's Anesthetic had an 81% drop. This is pretty typical, right around this number. 850 copies sold. I believe last week it was like 4,300 to 850. Still a good number, so good on you, Mark Morton. Bring Me the Horizon's Amo, 580 copies sold. Not great. Within Temptation's Resist is at number 200 on the charts this week, so it's in the last position with 540 copies sold. So this is why the Billboard charts started including streaming numbers in the overall 200, top 200 charts. Because traditional record sales are so low, you can get onto the Billboard charts with 540 copies sold. Just as an example, for a little perspective, my band Hatchet, in our first week last year, we released an album called Dying to Exist. It sold, I believe, 720 copies in its first week. We didn't get on the 200 charts for traditional album sales. We didn't. We got on the Heatseekers chart, but we didn't get on the actual 200. Ever since a few weeks after that, I started noticing that anybody that sold 700 started to get on the charts. And now, not even like 9 months later, all you have to do is sell 500 copies. So if that's any indication to the trend of the industry and traditional album sales going down, there's a really good example. Now you only have to sell 500 copies to get on the Billboard 200, right? So if they didn't add sales plus streaming, that would just be the overall top 200, and that's kind of embarrassing. So if you ever didn't understand why Billboard started adding streaming numbers into the overall 200 chart, there's your reason. There's your example right there, because 500 copies gets you onto the old chart, the traditional album sales chart. All right, guys, I gotta run back into work. Thank you for watching. I will see you next time.